Big news coming out of the transfer portal, and Syracuse didn't get anyone. Dior Johnson is on to his third school. We're going to tell you where his next destination is and also what it means for the Orange. The former Orange commit is just nomadic at this point. And also, we open up the mailbox and take a look at your comments and your questions right here on Locked On Syracuse. Let's do it.
Are Locked On Syracuse, your daily podcast on the Syracuse Orange, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome. I'm Brad Klein. He's Matt Bonaparte. Very happy to be with you here on Locked On Syracuse. We appreciate you making it your first listen every day, free and available wherever you get your podcasts. And this edition brought to you by BetOnline, because BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline is where the game starts. Bones, the game right now, Locked On Syracuse, it starts with Dior Johnson talk. And I know what you might be thinking. I know what a lot of Syracuse fans are thinking. Oh my God, do we really have to talk about Dior Johnson again? The former crown jewel of the class of 2022 decommits, goes to Oregon, but it doesn't actually go, verbally goes to Oregon. And now he's on to ACC rival Pittsburgh.
I mean, heinous is the only word that I can use to describe his actions here. If you went back in time to the spring of 2020 and told a Syracuse fan that the 2022 class would be described by Jim Boeheim as the greatest that he's ever had, you would have thought it would be headlined by Dior Johnson. I mean, this guy was the talk of the town. Well, you didn't know about Kamari Lands at that point.
Yeah, fair.
But this guy was the talk of the town. Everybody was so happy in Syracuse land that he was coming to Cuse. There were a lot of naysayers that said there was no chance he'd ever play a game. I think a lot of Syracuse fans at that point were trying to block out the haters, but it turned out the haters were right.
Be honest,
and when
were you one of those naysayers?
No, I was fully on the train of
me too.
Johnson is going to Syracuse, and
it was an emotional decision to just hop on the bandwagon, but it was fun while it lasted, to be honest.
Yeah. But as I will say, as time went on and I heard more of what the naysayers were saying, it started to make sense. And I said, I didn't say it to anybody. In my head, I was like, this guy ain't coming. But when he did move on to Oregon, I said there was a 0% chance he'd play a game in Oregon. So
I gotta give you props for that. That's a pretty bold take, and it panned out. So
the guy's over here. He's just he doesn't care. Like, how could you commit somewhere and be like, I'm going? Well, that's a good joke.
Okay. So,
well, hold on. Let me just say this.
Go ahead.
I think it's crazy that he started at Syracuse. Then he said, "No, I'm not doing that." Then he goes to Oregon. He said, "Nah, I'm not doing that." And then he falls all the way to Pitt. It's not a good program. It's a bad team. Like he's trying to be in like the replies, being like, "Yeah, see you in the dome." Like, dude. He's playing for the Panthers. Like,
okay.
What do you think you're doing?
All right. So, for those who don't know, Dior Johnson would have been the highest rated recruit that Syracuse would have had since Carmelo Anthony. Okay, so would have been a huge splash. 5-star at the time, the #1 point guard in the class. He was a top 15 recruit, but he's come down to earth big time. Now, redemption has been a motif when it comes to Syracuse fans and Dior Johnson. You're right. He goes from Syracuse to Oregon to Pitt, and that is, you're right, not a good program. See you in the dome. Dior Johnson's tweeting that. I'll tell you personally, Syracuse fans are very much looking forward to that. So there's that. And also, I feel like in the NBA, a lot of people give Kyrie Irving some grief for making a promise that he did not live up to with the Celtics. I'll be back if you'll have me. Dior Johnson promised to lead Syracuse out of the recruiting trenches. He promised to be a recruiter himself. And then what? He picks up and leaves. So that's not a great look, especially a guy who is kind of homegrown with Socrates. And if you want redemption, Bones, not only is he going to a worse program in Pitt, but he's also, as of now, rated lower than Judah Mintz, the
Yeah, I
actual
was
crown
about to
jewel of
say
the
that.
program, who was also about to go to Pittsburgh before he decided on Syracuse.
Yes. Was it really Pitt? I thought it was DePaul.
No, DePaul was in on it too, but Judah Mintz was rumored to be going to Pittsburgh, and then he flipped to Syracuse pretty much last minute.
Yeah. Well, anyway, what I was gonna say is, according to B and Cardi at ESPN, Syracuse totally won this whole thing with Kamari Lands and Dior Johnson, because Lands on that ranking is 39th, Dior's 35th, and Judah's 33rd. So cool with us. Like that's totally cool with us. Do whatever you want, man. Like Judah's fine with us, and don't even have to mention the other 5 guys coming in this class. Like, well, whatever. Go do your thing. I hope we see you in the dome. I mean, this guy is about to have just raining booze when he enters the
That's
JMA
gonna be a
dome.
hot ticket. It's a hot. Oh my
Dude,
god! It's a
I
JMA.
think that's gonna be a big game to go to. People are just
Oh, yeah.
gonna want to go boo
Yeah.
Dior Johnson.
Yeah.
And also, they're both in the ACC because Lance is at Louisville, so that game too. Like, that's ridiculous.
But Lands less because Lands
He
was
still did the same thing.
he did do the same thing. Now the difference was that Lands decommitted, but it was after Dior Johnson had decommitted. So Syracuse fans had already been through the fire, and they were going into that thing. I think a lot more fans were being cynical about Kamari Lands than they were Dior Johnson, just because of the precedent that Johnson had already set. So it hurt less.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, yeah,
And
no,
also,
you're right,
Johnson is
totally. But
from the region. He's supposed to come to Syracuse, and he was going to, and he promised. And then Syracuse actually kind of got guys. People forget that Benny Williams was in communication with Dior Johnson before he got to Syracuse. Benny Williams, you can make the argument, is at Syracuse because of Dior Johnson, and Johnson never even went to Syracuse. That's how. It wasn't just an empty promise. It was a half-fulfilled promise, and that even hurts more because we saw the power of Dior Johnson. We saw the capability, and he just did not see it through.
and Syracuse fans are where we acted hurt during the whole Dior Johnson saga. Think about how Quincy Gary feels. Happened to him twice. Happened to the guy twice now. Poor guy.
See,
I don't really feel bad for Quincy Gary because I think he hates Syracuse and whatever.
Yeah,
man.
he does.
Go out to the West Coast. Hate us all you want. I don't really care, but I think it is funny that it happened to him twice.
See, here's the thing. I try to be very sensitive to the fact that these are kids. Now, Guerrier less so than other people because he happens to be an older college player than most. Dior Johnson's in high school. Kamari Lands is in high school. So I'm not trying to be that guy. But I do take pleasure in the failure of others at times. That is a flaw of mine. And it's pretty funny. Hey, I am the voice of the people. That is how we brand ourselves on Locked On Syracuse. I'd be lying to the people if I said this isn't objectively hilarious. And the other thing, we're going to boo him. He's going to be 19, and Syracuse fans are going to boo him. He's 19, but we're still going to do it. We're still going to do it.
What I think is funny about it is that he's still prodding and bragging, like, "Oh, I'll see you in the dome, dude." Again, you're playing for Pitt. Who do you think you're not? You're not.
He's going to revolutionize
anything.
Pitt.
You're contending for nothing. You're going to a team that has nothing. What do you think you're doing, man? You could have gone to Syracuse, who is, I mean, arguably totally on the up and up, and a team in Oregon who's on the up and up too. But instead, you picked neither of those. Maybe he just wants to be the guy. He just wants to show up and be the only option, because that's really the only thing I can think of. That guy wants to show up and be the dude with his ball at all points in the game.
Then you know what? Go to DePaul. Like Zion Cruz, right?
Zion Cruz is there now.
I know. So I guess you can't go now, but go to a figurative DePaul at that point. Look, if Dior Johnson wants to be the guy, that's cool. You're in the wrong conference. Say you want to go to Pittsburgh, fine. But the funny thing is, I actually think he would have been the guy had he stayed in the class of 2022. Because, I mean, yeah, you want to make the argument that he's not the highest rated recruit of the guys we're talking about with Judah Mintz. No way Judah Mintz comes to Syracuse if Dior Johnson is there. There's just no way. So it was his class. he had a unique position and a unique power with the class of 2022. He chose not to exercise it. He chose to let go of the reins and head to Oregon, and that's his choice. More Dior Johnson talk in a second, but let me tell you a little bit about BetOnline, because BetOnline is your number one source for all your betting stats and sports information. Find all of the latest sports developments, news, odds, and including this year's basketball championship matchup, the NHL Hockey Conference Finals, Major League Baseball, and of course, all the latest fighting news from MMA and UFC to boxing. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sporting wagering information, including live betting, esports, and more. Head to the website today or just use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline is where the game starts. And Bones, we're talking about Dior Johnson here. Brutal day for Dior Johnson, but I sense you have something else to add.
Yeah, let me tell you about the NBA or the ultimate NBA mock draft, which starts June 16th. Over 50 insiders. Nothing equals the ultimate NBA mock draft. The Locked On NBA Big Board Draft experts plus the Odyssey insiders. First pick is June 16th. Search Ultimate NBA mock draft and follow now so you do not miss a pick.
So I guess the question really is, will Dior Johnson be involved in that podcast this coming year with not this coming year, but in 2 years, I guess you could say, with the NBA big board, the NBA mock draft? That's been his MO for a very long time at this point, I feel like. And Dior Johnson bouncing around, I think a lot of people thought he would be going pro one way or another, whether that's international or even in the G League ranks now.
Well,
That's
yeah.
becoming a trend. He just didn't, and to me, that was a surprise. Even when he decommitted from Syracuse, I thought for sure, no way he plays for another school.
Well, that was the reason that people were saying he wasn't going to play for Syracuse because he hadn't been linked to anything, but we
Yeah.
knew that like that was something he was open to. Which kind of, and it was right when that was getting hot, guys going to the G League. Jalen Green was a big name at the time who did that. So yeah, I mean, that was the thing. And I think this was a stupid decision from him, but I wouldn't have thought that if he went to Australia or he
Yeah.
went to G League Ignite or something like that and got over $1 million to play basketball on the way to going to the NBA. I would have been like, fine, man. I don't really like you, but
I
like,
will
good for
say
you. You're getting
I
your
will
money.
say that NIL has changed drastically since he first committed to Syracuse, and it seems crazy because it wasn't that long ago, but so much has happened since. So there is a financial incentive for him
Yeah,
to stay in college. That is an
but I
added
don't.
element.
I guess, but like, how likable is this guy? Like, I don't.
Okay, so that's a very good question. So that brings us to a very important thing. Okay, so you're saying that a lot of the analysts, a lot of the experts are saying that Syracuse won the quote unquote trade, give up Kamari Lands, give up Dior Johnson, quote unquote, because it's not an actual
It was not
trade.
a trade in any sense of the word.
But you're essentially swapping out these two guys, and you're getting what you actually have in Judah Mintz and Justin Taylor and Chris Bunch and Malik Brown, Peter Carey, really strong class top to bottom, right? So you take that if you're a Syracuse fan. But the biggest reason, just to interpret it, it's not the rankings, it's not the X's and O's. Dior Johnson, and I'm trying to be sensitive here because I know he's a kid, but Dior Johnson has already, before even stepping on the floor, developed a reputation as a locker
He's a
room
villain.
cancer.
No, I
That's
don't know about that.
well, why? Why would you want him in the locker room? Because he's a quitter. He's already quit
No.
on 2 teams.
Okay, hold on.
That's
I
what
don't
it
think you should
is.
label the guy just because for the like
Just
that.
because what? Because he left 2 programs before even stepping on the floor? Because he promised his
I
home
don't.
fan
Okay,
base something
you
that
can
didn't
call him that,
happen?
but I don't. You can't call him a locker room cancer. You have no idea what he's like as a teammate
I
or
don't
what
know what
he's
he's
like
like
in the
as a
locker room.
teammate, but it's so much noise around a player. And villain is a good way to describe it too, because he's made a lot of enemies along the way. But if you're a coach, especially a coach like Jim Boeheim, who's kind of old school in a sea of new school, why would you want him in your locker room? Like, can you imagine how Dior Johnson and Jim Boeheim would clash?
It would be hilarious.
Because that
I
Dior
would. I
Johnson
wish
is
we had
not
those press conferences.
Dior Johnson is not the type of player that Jim Boeheim signs up to coach every year for the past half century. Just not. And you can make the argument that Boeheim is just behind in the times and he's a get off my lawn old man that needs to change, and NIL is going to force more Dior Johnsons into the fold. You can make that argument, But at the end of the day, not a part of the culture that Jim Boeheim wanted, and probably not what Oregon wanted either. Now, if you remember, when Johnson decommitted, Boeheim said it was a mutual decision.
Yeah, you're right. He did say that.
He said that, and I think a lot of people thought it was kind
But
of
I
BS at the
thought it was
time,
kind of just Boeheim-y, yeah.
but now I think we owe Boeheim and anyone else who was saying that an apology, because it's so clearly true that there's something else with Dior Johnson. At the time, the T was that his grades weren't up to snuff, and Syracuse decided to move on. But clearly, there's something outside of basketball here.
Um, well, what I was going to say in terms of what you're going to label him as, I think he's a great villain already in college
Yeah.
basketball. He already has two teams that probably hate him. And he's kind of, I think, best case scenario here, he kind of molds his character into a Marcus Smart or a Draymond Green, where you love having him on your team, but if he was anywhere else, you'd hate him, kind of thing. I know those guys kind of get that rap for how they play, not necessarily who they are. Um, but I think Dior Johnson could totally have that rap, and maybe that helps him in terms of NIL stuff, and Pitt fans learn to love him for that.
See, I don't know, and I know we're up against it here on a break, but Bones, in terms of pro comparisons and not X's and O's, it has nothing to do with position. You're talking about a Draymond Green and Marcus Smart as in an unlikable player if you don't have them, if you're playing against them, and a lovable player if you have them. But I'm thinking Kyrie Irving here, and it's not just because of the point guard spot. It's because the guy promised Boston that he would stay. This guy promised Syracuse that not only would he stay, but he would help while he's there. And I think now, again, we don't know. I mean, Kyrie Irving seems like a nice guy, but he just rubs people the wrong way. How do you think Dior Johnson is going to rub people after quitting on two teams? It's just connecting dots. I've
We
never
still
met him.
haven't seen the guy on a basketball court at this level,
I
so like
know.
I think there's a lot to be said that we haven't seen yet. So I don't want to make too many quick judgments on the kid. But I will say it doesn't bode well for who you're gonna be inside the locker room. I'll give you that. But I just think you should withhold judgment till we actually see something. Will I be surprised to hear that teammates don't like him? No, but I don't know if I'm going to necessarily peg him as that guy right now.
Yeah, no, I get it. I get it. You always have to proceed with caution when you make a claim like that, and we don't know what he will be on the floor. If he's bad at basketball, then almost none
That
of
would
this
be
matters.
crazy.
It would also
It would
be,
be one of
for the
the
Syracuse
great.
fan, objectively hilarious. That would
Yes, it
be
would be
insane.
hilarious. If he was bad at basketball, it would be kind of hilarious for Syracuse fans. But it would also be like a crazy fall from grace for Dior
Oh yeah,
Johnson. This
yeah.
was a guy who was like number 1 through 4 in the class at some point. Like he was so high in the
He was
class.
the number one point guard for most of the time leading up to this recruiting
And
class.
if he comes out and he's just not it, it will be crazy. It would be
And
crazy.
and you know, the funny thing is, and I keep on going back to Kyrie here, a lot of people put up with the Kyrie stuff because he is an all-world talent. If Dior Johnson is not an all-nation talent in college basketball, then he's in trouble when it comes to perception. I really think that. And I think that the more stuff he pulls, the more fan bases and people that he ticks off, the higher standard he commands on the floor. He needs to be even better now than he had to be after leaving Syracuse, because now he has two fan bases barking down his neck.
Yeah, I mean, idiotic couple moves from him. The guy, I mean, just idiotic. All right, well, let's move from the basketball side of things to the football side of things. We're talking about a cornerback. His name's Zion Tracy. This is a guy Syracuse pretty interested in, Brad. Somebody who could be bolstering the SU secondary in a couple years to come. A class of 23 guy who was offered by SU, offered by other teams that don't exactly have huge name value. Temple, Rutgers, UMass, Marshall, Maine, Connecticut, and Buffalo. Kind of goes along with your theory that UMass just offers everybody. I don't
They
see
do.
Sienna here, which goes
I think it's
across the board.
adorable when they do it, though. I think it's awesome.
Hey, they're trying, man. Give them that. Hey, Wofford was the first team to offer Zion Williamson, so everyone's got to have their hat in the ring. But Zion Tracy, a little bit undersized, 5'11", 180, but he's got some meat on the bone. He's from New York, though, so that is the thing that
Yes.
is exciting because Dino Babers, we've said, like, it is cool that we've been able to say he's from New York about a couple of prospects
Yeah.
because up until this point, it has been all about why can't Dino recruit New York? Now, is this guy the number one
Because he's
prospect in New
focused
York?
on
No, he's
Florida,
not.
of course.
Yeah, he is. Is he the number one prospect in New York? No, he's currently unrated by 24/7 Sports,
Yeah.
but at least he's going after guys in state. And he's been on this guy as of today, as we're recording this, yesterday, when we're
Yeah,
recording this
yeah.
Monday night.
So
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 Tuesday.
when it comes to a guy like Tracy, um, first of all, he's a multi-position player, and the recruiting is led by Tony White. So he's a wide receiver slash corner, kind of like an
He can do
athlete.
both.
He can do both. He probably won't in college. If Tony
No
White is
chance.
leading the recruitment, then he's probably a defensive back, and that's fine. Um, Tony White already has developed a reputation as a DB guru of sorts, and his 3-3-5 is fun to play in. And more importantly, and it's not just the fact that he can also play a wide receiver, but clearly this is not a guy who's tied down to one position. He's a versatile player. He's an athlete on the recruiting charts. So that's the type of player that you want if you're Dino Babers, if you're Tony White with your 3-3-5, because you just want athletes out there, let them make plays, and you want the versatility there as well. So a lot of Syracuse fans might be scared by the lack of stars and the lack of hype, but you just have to trust Tony White that he's finding guys for his system.
And an example in which that worked was Trill Williams.
Yeah.
That's a guy who was just a pure athlete.
No Tony
And
White
when
at
he
the
was
time.
correct. And when Trill was on the team, he was, I think, far and away the greatest athlete that Syracuse football had. He was
Hey, Josh
fantastic when he
Black is
played in
running
high
up
school.
walls at the time, so look out.
Sure, but I don't know. It would be close between those two guys if they had like I don't know, an athlete off. I
American
don't know what
Ninja
you do.
Warrior.
I guess they'd have to go to like a weird combine. Yeah, sure, that would work. Trill was so cool though, and I'm not necessarily saying Zion Tracy's anything that Trill is, but if he is anything that Trill is, it's going to be that the dude's just a pure athlete, and you throw him at cornerback, and that's going to work a lot of the time.
Yes, yeah, I completely agree. And Syracuse is again developed a reputation as that DBU, so there is an attractiveness there. You talked a little bit, was it last week, about the ripple effects of that DBU persona that Syracuse has taken over. So you're right, get the athletes in there. And this guy, and you mentioned before, he's not a highly rated recruit, but Syracuse is not the only Power 5 team in on him. He was committed to Temple and decommitted on my birthday, December 1st, and reopened his commitment back here. And now Syracuse is very much in the fold. I think it's exciting.
Yeah, it totally is exciting because you're seeing the future of what the program is going to be with or without Dino Babers. Brad and I have said a tumultuous amount of times that Dino Babers needs to have some sort of success in the upcoming season. Brad's take is more of time based. He needs to success in November. I just think the guy needs 6 wins. But listen, if he's going to get to Zion Tracy's days on the hill, he's going to have to put it together somehow. All right, Brad. Well, I think Zion Tracy totally does add to this class. And also, it's in a pool of teams that's entirely beatable. If you lose to any of these teams, it's a huge failure.
If you lose to Rutgers, I don't know if you can call that a huge failure. Outside of that, it would be a failure. And Rutgers and Syracuse are the only two Power 5 teams. And I don't have to tell you about the geography about this. He's from Long Island. Rutgers is far closer to home than Syracuse. So if we wanted to get nitpicky on this, but I do think especially for a defensive back, Syracuse has a lot more to offer. I do think that as a whole, and maybe people get upset at me for saying this, I think as a whole, Rutgers is a better program. Do you disagree with that?
I think it's close. I mean,
I just
Rutgers
much
is
rather
definitely
play
one of
for
the
Chiano than Dino Babers. That's the
yes, but Rutgers is one of the only teams as of late that is as bad as Syracuse is.
yeah. Don't
I
sleep
mean,
on
like
Kansas.
don't forget when Chris Ash was in charge of that team, how bad they were.
Oh, they were terrible.
They were terrible.
Yeah.
Like really just not watchable.
Yes, and I completely agree with that. Yeah, I think Syracuse will honestly probably get him. The funny thing is they need him more at wide receiver than they need him at corner.
It's true. I don't think he'll play wide receiver.
No, I don't think so either.
But well, that does it for this episode of Locked On Syracuse. Thank you for making Locked On Syracuse your first listen today. And I make your second listen to Locked On NBA Big Board Podcast. Rafael Barlow, Richard Stamen, Sam Ferris, and Leif Thulin give fans an in-depth look into the biggest prospects, the latest player rankings, and of course, big boards. Follow Locked On NBA Big Board every day on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcast. Brad and I will be back tomorrow with another episode, and hopefully later this week with an interview or maybe two. So stay tuned for that. Until then, we will see you next time. Peace out.